We'll see if this lasts the entirety of the show. Hi everybody, it's wonderful to be back here at San Japan. After a year of being isolated inside of my house, it's great to see all of your faces again. Masked up or not, it's great. You guys ready to hear some really disgusting stories? I don't know if you saw on Twitter, I said they're going to be really gross today. You guys excited for that? Yeah! The energy makes me how you feel it. It's good. I love it. Before I get started, I'm going to tell you guys about two things. Okay? Two things that are going on real quick. One, after last year I've decided I don't want to sell anything anymore, so all the posters I have at this convention are free. So if you see me in my booth, just feel free to take one. And my wife and my sister are over there in that corner. If you guys want any of the posters I have, just go over to them and take them, okay? They're super cool. They also have flyers for my online virtual reality horror convention in October called HorrorCon VR. Just gonna show that real quick. I'm also gonna show this. Everybody take a look. It's a little MrCreepyPasta stuffed animal. Ain't cute? These will be available on my thing in October. This is a really big thing for me, and I hope all of you love him. He glows in the dark. Yeah, his little noodles glow. It's so cute. Okay, enough of that. You guys ready to hear scary stories? Yeah. This is super weird for me. I'm used to having Yuji, like right there. And he's not here, and my little heart is broken for it, but he said next year he really wants to come back, so all of you stay tuned with us, because we'll have the German piano player back next year, hopefully. Soon the plagues are all done. Till then, we're going to be doing this a nice campfire story style, so it's just going to be me, it's going to be you, and it's going to be a story. You guys going to be happy with that?
Oh yeah.
Sweet. Back in 2019, I traveled with my friends MrCreepyPasta and Mew. We did a little tour across the entirety of the United States telling scary stories, playing board games, and playing music. Did anybody here catch me at any point during that? Woo! 1, 2, 3, 4, it's sweet. That means for a majority of you, this is all going to be brand new. For you guys, sorry. So, as we do every time, I'm going to give you guys a couple quick words about what horror is, right? Because I hate one specific term, and that's the word psychological horror. Because all horror, if done right, is going to be psychological. It always takes advantage of certain things about you that makes you scared. Specifically, Stephen King says that horror is made up of 3 things. If you've been on one of my panels, you know these 3 things. The first thing is gross out horror, one of my favorites. Stephen King says, if you close your eyes, and you can smell something that's rancid, and you can hear the drip of something wet. If you take a step, you can feel the squelch of something going between your toes. And when you open your eyes, you see something you don't want to see, like blood and guts and poop and things like that. Something that's going to absolutely gross you out, something you're terrified of seeing. That is called gross out horror. And there are certain things about gross out horror that a lot of different movies play into. Has any of you seen Saw before? That's considered a movie that really plays on your anxiety of gross out horror. You know you're going to see gore, but you don't want to see it. It's something gross. Then there's the thing he calls horror. And once again, when we close our eyes, and we can hear the scrape of metal against the wall. You can feel breath on the back of your neck. You can sense something large looming over you. And when you open your eyes, you see something that can physically hurt you or physically hurt a character, like Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, Xenomorphs, all these different kinds of horror killers, slashers, something that can physically harm you. That's called horror. And the last one is what most people refer to as a psychological or a terror. And that's going to be when you have your eyes closed and you can smell something rancid. You can feel breath on the back of your neck. You can hear the slice of a knife against the wall. When you open your eyes, there's nothing there. And that's considered to be terror because all these things individually, there's nothing actually wrong with them. There's nothing scary about them. But inside of your own mind, you make up that terror. You make up that anxiety. So, I have 3 stories for you tonight. And each one of those is going to take in account one different element or multiple different elements of horror to hopefully give you some nightmares. At least that's my goal. So, first one is gross out. Take a look to your left. Take a look to your right. Notice how there's people there? By the end of the story, there may not be. And if they're not, those were the weak ones. This is a story by Vincent Vinicala called Out of Me. Oh wait, I should say this before I get started. I'm going to say bad words. if you didn't know what this was and you brought your kid here because they like YouTube, then like, oh man, I'm about to say some real bad words, and like, just be prepared for that, okay? This should be like a Teenage Plus panel. I don't know if it says that in the book, but I'm gonna go ahead and treat it like that. All right, listen. I want to start off with a bit of a warning before I get into this. See, I recommend you put down whatever it is you might be munching on at the moment and save it for later. If you're a stubborn ass like me and couldn't care less what some jack-off on the internet says, then at least err on the side of caution. At least chew your food down quickly and swallow it as fast as possible. You'll want to give your meal at least a little bit of time to settle before I get to the third act of the story. And don't say I didn't warn you, okay? Oh, and one last thing. If you decided to ignore this little tidbit of advice, then I really hope that you aren't eating spaghetti. Okay, let's start the story. So, I've always been a fat ass, all right? My earliest childhood memory is my Nana poking me in the stomach and making fun of how jiggly it was. Oh, you're such a chubby little porker, she would say. Yeah, it's kind of a shitty thing to say from a grandmother, don't you think? Well, that bitch died 10 years ago of lung cancer, so who's laughing now? Look, I wasn't that cool fat kid in class either. You know, the jubber who gets to hang out with the popular kids, the scores the piggy dates, the homecoming from girls too afraid to go stag. No, I was bullied, and pretty mercilessly at that. Maybe it was because of how big I was. See, fat is more of an understatement, really. At my heaviest, I was a shade under 400 pounds, which means that I was a bit more of a walking whale than a guy with a weight problem. I have no one to blame than myself. See, I hate exercising. And health food makes me want to puke. When it comes to food, the less nutritious, the better. Chocolate milk? Yeah, I mean, I fuck with that. Fettuccine Alfredo, the creamier, the better. Greasy ass, food court pizza. Extra sausage, extra pepperoni, extra cheese. No veggies. It's an addiction, I get it. But what can I say? I love to eat. My doctor used to always tell me that if I don't clean up my act, I was going to die. When I hit 30, he really started to ramp up the rhetoric, the gout, the cardiac disease, etc., the stroke. Do you want to die of diabetes, bro? My doctor didn't say bro. But I just added that part myself. But I feel like it really helps emphasize the point he was trying to make. Bro, you're killing yourself, bro. It wasn't like I didn't try to lose the weight. I took up jogging for a week. I even tried Weight Watchers, but no matter what I did, I just couldn't break my addiction to sweets and fatty foods. It was all that made me happy, and I never saw myself being able to quit. So I just resigned myself to the fact that I'd probably meet an early death. You see, if you want to live to be 100, you've got to give up all the things that make you want to live to be 100. And where's the fun in that? Now, all that being said, it should come as no surprise to you that I love the county fair. Now, if you've never been, then you should really check it out. It's a food lover's paradise. I suppose it would also be a goat fucker's paradise, but I don't go there for the petting zoo, you know what I'm saying? I go for the food. That has everything you can think of, and some ridiculous concoctions you could never have imagined. Deep fried butter, bacon wrapped cinnamon buns, inside out grilled cheese. Have you ever had a hot beef sundae? Now, don't knock it till you try it. So, about a year ago, I was at the fair hunting for something ridiculous to shovel down my gullet. There were so many options, I didn't know what to try first. I was contemplating a stand that sold macaroni cupcakes and one that sold something called a bacon explosion, when the sign of one food cart tucked away in the corner caught my eye. Now, the sign read, Franken sausage. It was hot as balls out, and the lines at the other food places were huge, so I walked with my lard ass over to the cart to see what a Franken sausage was all about. Now, the carny working the cart seemed the type of guy who spent his evenings at the petting zoo, if you catch my drift. Now, I know that I won't ever be on the cover of GQ, so I probably don't have much room to talk, but this guy, he looked like somebody took the bassist from ZZ Top and put him in the microwave. His beard hung down past his chest, and I don't think he washed it once in the past 20 years. There may have been a bird nesting in it for all I know. His mouth was a dentist's worst nightmare. You can count the amount of teeth he had on it in one hand. He nodded and met eyes as I approached. Sort of. See, one of his eyes stared straight ahead and the other was planted firmly at 3 o'clock. Man, seriously, if looks could kill, this guy could kill around corners. So, Franken sausages, eh? I said. Kind of missed a golden opportunity to call them Frankenfranks. He nodded, but I don't think he got my joke. I waited a while for him to say something, but he just sat there, quietly, looking simultaneously at me and at the jump castle about 10 feet off to my right. So, what is a Franken sausage anyway? I asked. God's every kind of meat you can think of, he responded in a raspy voice. I was actually impressed he could speak with all of just 4 teeth. 3.5, really. Pork, beef, chicken, turkey, lamb, cat, llama, guinea pig. The list goes on. He told me that he buys leftover meat from processing plants, that he catches the cats, that he breeds the guinea pigs himself. He didn't tell me where he got the llama from, but then again, I didn't care to ask. Oh wait, you think I didn't eat that shit after finding out what was in it? Of course I did. Have you not been paying attention? I told you I was a fat ass. When else would I get the chance to eat 8 different animals in one sitting? And slather it in nacho cheese too, and you know what? It tasted pretty good. Now, I went on with a day of binge eating at the fair after that, and by the time I was halfway through my second chocolate chip funnel cake, I had completely forgotten about the imprint Carney caricature and his freaky Franken sausages. Now fast forward about a month, I noticed that my 4XL slacks are a bit roomier than they used to be. Now before I went to the fair, they had been a little too snug to wear, and I was worried I'd have to go up a size. And had I been losing weight? My doctor confirmed my suspicions the day in his office when I went in for a physical. You've lost 30 pounds, he told me excitedly. Have you been dieting? I didn't know what to say, so I explained to him that I started a new fast. But in reality, I've been eating more than ever. All month, it was like my stomach had turned into a bottomless pit. Now, I know I lied, but please don't judge me, okay? It's nice to hear him not nagging me for once. I left his office beaming that day, feeling hopeful about my weight problem for the first time in my life. And the pounds, they just kept coming off. Even though I'd been eating like a pig, it didn't matter. I was feeling great and I was losing weight. There was one little caveat, though. See, I've been taking massive dumps. I mean, seriously, my craps could clear bathrooms. Not even the flies would stick around. I figured I was somehow just shitting off the weight. In 4 months, I had dropped 80 pounds. After 6 months, I was buying the smallest size at Big and Tall, and after 10, I was shopping in normal people clothes stores. I hadn't been under 300 pounds since 8th grade. You know, it's funny how differently people treat you when you're not as big as a house. Coworkers started inviting me out for happy hour. Strangers were nicer to me on the street. I even managed to score a girlfriend. Life was good. I didn't care how or why I was getting skinnier. I just hoped that it would continue. And then, one night, I got to the bottom of the mystery. It was a quiet Saturday evening. I was chilling at my place with my girlfriend watching a movie when I felt this awful bubbling in my stomach. Oh boy, I thought to myself, this was going to be a shit of biblical proportions. I excused myself to the bathroom, I locked the door, I dropped trowel, and I prepared myself for the crap to end all craps. I had made it just in time. Dude, the second I sat down on the toilet, my butt erupted like Old Faithful. And it burned coming out too, as if I was some kind of dyslexic dragon that farted fire instead of breathing it. And the smell was unbearable. I don't usually mind my own brand, but it stunk so bad it practically singed my nose hairs. After a few minutes, my stomach gave me a bit of a break, though I knew that there was still more to come. Don't ask me why, okay? But I stood up to take a look at what I had done. Now, call it a morbid curiosity, okay? I wanted to admire my own work before I flushed it down. And it's not like you haven't done it either. Now, I'd expected the inside of my toilet to be an absolute shit show. But I couldn't have possibly been prepared for what I was now looking at. The sight made my head spin. The walls of the toilet were stained red with blood. The water in the bowl was now so dark I couldn't see the bottom. It was like staring into some stinky black hole that traps light and expels a mind-numbing poo gas. But the thing that frightened me the most was not what was in the toilet bowl, but what was hanging out of it. thin white strand about a ½ inch in diameter, and it was still dangling from me. Oh my God, I thought to myself, this is it. My diet's finally caught up to me. I've been shitting out my intestines. And it wasn't until I looked closer and saw the thing hanging out of my butt was moving that I realized it wasn't my intestines at all. Although I'm not sure if the alternative was actually worse. I was passing a tapeworm. And a big one at that. If I had to estimate, there was already about 2.5 feet of it coiled in the bottom of the bowl. Honey, I heard my girlfriend's voice on the other side of the door. Is everything okay? You've been in there for a while. Yeah, everything's fine, babe. Just a little stomach bug. At least it wasn't a lie, okay? Go watch the movie. I'll be out in a few. Now, I needed this thing out of me immediately. So I tried flushing, hoping the pressure would pull the tapeworm out of my butt and down the drain. But that didn't work. Now I can see it more clearly in the toilet's clean water, writhing and twisting on the end, in and out of itself, like some kind of Lovecraftian turd from hell. I knew then that it was too big to flush away. Even if I did manage to get the worm out of me and down the drain, it would most likely clog it. How are they supposed to explain that to a plumber? So I scooped the wriggling white mass out of the toilet and I popped it into the sink. So I was going to remove this thing. I'd have to do it manually. I bent over, I reached between my legs, and I began to pull. And pull. And pull more. Inch by inch, the slimy thing slid out of me, and I tried not to faint at the sight of it. Coated in blood and fecal matter, wriggling and writhing as I birthed it from my ass. The whole time I worked, I cursed myself for eating that shady sausage at the fair. It felt like it took forever to completely remove the nasty parasite. By the time I was done, I had piled as much as 6 feet of it into the sink. I stared down at it once I had finished, horrified at what had just come out of me. I mean, no wonder I lost so much weight. A tapeworm was massive. It had been feeding off of me for close to a year. And then, a new idea popped into my head. One that terrified me even more than the parasite that was wriggling around in the sink. All the good things that had happened to me. The way that my doctor stopped nagging me, the new friends from work that I had made, my girlfriend, who I absolutely adored. It had all been because of the weight loss. And I had the tapeworm to thank for that. I mean, without it absorbing the nutrients from the junk food that I had been eating, I would need to make some serious life changes in order to keep up with the weight loss. Working out, eating salads, giving up sweets. But there's no way I'd be able to do that. I mean, I failed at it before. I knew that I'd fail at it again. Soon enough, I would get fat again, and my life would go back to being the sad, lonely existence that it once was. And I couldn't lose it. The worm was going into its death throes, and I was sure that it wouldn't survive much longer without a host. But there was a way to prevent that. The worm didn't want to die, and I didn't want to get fat again. I mean, maybe I thought it wasn't really a parasite at all. Maybe our relationship was mutually beneficial. Maybe we could help each other out before it was too late. I plunged my hand into the sink and I began to fish around for the end of the tapeworm. I mean, I still had weight to lose. Another 8 months and my BMI would be in the healthy range. I located the end of the tapeworm, and then I sucked the slippery thing into my mouth. I mean, it didn't taste as bad as I thought it would, but I could feel it twist and squirm all the way down into my stomach. Inch by inch, I swallowed it, trying to forget about the fact that this worm had just come out of me. It's just cold spaghetti, I told myself. Just cold spaghetti that smells like asshole. By the time I had done the entire thing, I felt like I cleaned out a Vegas buffet by myself. And even though I was uncomfortably full, I was positive my plan would work. I left the bathroom, sat back down on the couch, unbuckled my belt, and I gave my girlfriend a big kiss on the lips. There was no way I was going to let her go. So that was 2 months ago. And I've shed 20 pounds since then. People are super impressed with how much weight that I've been able to drop, but I'm not finished with my body transformation quite yet. See, I'd do anything to drop the weight. Every couple of weeks, that stubborn tapeworm tries to squirm its way out of me when I'm relieving myself, and each time it's longer and it's wider than before, but I've gotten better at swallowing it back down where it belongs. It has a job to do. I have a fitness goal, and I'm not letting it go until I lose the weight. That was out of me, but I meant something like that. Man, we did not lose nearly as many people as I thought. But there's many I was hearing. I was like, man, this place is about to be cleared out. You know, me and 5 people here are about to enjoy this next story. Okay, so, I don't know if you guys know this. I guess I tell this story every time that I'm here, but it's one of my favorites. It means a lot to me. I don't think last year or 2019 I kind of explained it, but there's a story that's really special to me. When I was a kid, the kind of what inspired the whole MrCreepyPasta thing in general was when I was a kid, there was this storyteller that came to my school, like around October. Actually, I think it was like on Halloween. And mind you, I was like 4th grade, 3rd grade. I was a real little kid. This guy shows up, and like the teacher leads us all into the library, and he tells us the story of the Taylor poem. You guys probably remember the story of the Taylor poem. You've heard it before. You heard it at camp or something like that. And it was just him, and he used different voices when he was telling it. He had this wonderful storytelling ability, and by the time he reached the end of it, I was scared shitless. Like, I was just terrified as a child to like sleep with any lights off, like the Taylor poem's not even that scary of a story, but I was chilled to the bone, right? And when I got started doing this, I was kind of like, that's honestly the level I want to be at. I want to be able to tell a story just using my voice, and I want to make sure that I can just terrify people, especially little kids. I want to terrify people to the point where it's just something that they're going to be really afraid of with these kind of like classic stories, these campfire stories, and in a lot of cases, creepypastas. So I have a campfire story here. It's a story I worked with J.R. Wilson on his audiobook right behind me. And I tell the story every time. If you guys have ever been to my shows, you'll know the story. But if you haven't been to shows, prepare yourself. And please, if you have seen this one before, please don't ruin it, but absolutely take advantage of the punchline. In 1880s Georgia, there lived a wealthy young woman in a grand plantation house. The woman's name was Annabelle Walters, and she inherited her fortune from her father, who had made his money in cotton farming. Now, her father had been cruel to his slaves, but tender to his wife and daughter. And in 1864, baby Annabelle almost died in a fire set by William Sherman's soldiers on their march to the sea. Her mother saved her from death, but could not save her left arm, which was so badly burned that it had to be amputated. But the rest of Annabelle's body and her pretty face remained unscathed. But her father wanted the replacement for her arm to be as beautiful and as perfect as the rest of her. And so, when Annabelle was a teenager, her father had an arm cast out of solid gold. And everyone marveled at how shiny and yet how lifelike Annabelle's new arm was, even if it was cold and artificial. Annabelle's mother died of fever not long after the casting of the golden arm. And a few years after that, her father died in a steamboat explosion. And so, young, lovely Annabelle Walters lived by herself in her family's old mansion, with only an old dog named Ranger to keep her company. Now, of course, many bachelors wanted to marry Miss Walters for her wealth. They talked of love and affection, but Annabelle was no fool, and she turned down many a scheming suitor. But George was different. His family didn't come from wealth. He had been a self-made rancher out west, but most importantly, he truly loved Annabelle for who she was, and not for her money. The two wed, they shared several happy years together. And then one dreary October, Annabelle fell sick with the same fever that killed her mother. The doctors, the best and most expensive doctors in the country, did all they could, but they could not save her. By mid-November, lovely Annabelle lay on her deathbed, her beloved George beside her in the final hours. George, darling, before I pass, I have one last request to impart upon you, she said. Yes, my love, anything. What is it? He replied. My arm. My golden arm. It's my most precious possession, more important to me than this house or any of my jewelry. Please, bury me in the ground with my golden arm, said Annabelle. Yes, Annabelle, if that's what you desire, I shall, said George. Promise me, George. It's my final will upon this earth. And George gulped before replying. I promise to bury you with your golden arm, darling. Annabelle fell silent and was dead within a few minutes. George and a few of Annabelle's cousins were the only ones to attend her funeral, and she was buried in the Walters family cemetery down the road from the mansion, in accordance with her last wish. George buried Annabelle with her golden arm. The night following the burial, George was sitting in front of the fireplace, Ranger the dog asleep at his side. He thought about his future, his love life, his living arrangements. And then he thought of his financial situation. See, neither him nor, of course, Annabelle had worked a day during their whole marriage. The Walters family fortune had paid for all that they wanted. But that money, between the doctor's fees and Annabelle's lavish headstone, that money was nearly gone. See, George had become lazy and accustomed to leisure life. If only there had been another source of wealth. And then he remembered the golden arm. But that arm was made out of solid gold. It must be worth a small fortune itself, he thought. But it was already buried with its owner, as per her final will. But wouldn't Annabelle want him to be happy and not destitute? And hadn't she been a bit delirious towards the end with that fever thrashing about her brain? And surely, George thought, surely the poor woman wasn't even thinking straight. And now, she was dead and couldn't care whether she was buried with a golden arm or not. George made a decision. He put on his cloak, for the air was chilled that November night. And he brought up the lantern, for the sky and the road were as dark as a cave. He creaked open the door to the tool shed, and he grabbed a shovel, the strongest looking one he could find, for he would have 6 feet down to dig through cold, hard ground. The sky was filled with clouds. No moon nor stars greeted George on his solitary march to Annabelle's grave. The wind whispered through the grass and the naked branches of the trees like the voices of creatures best unseen. And George hugged his cloak tight around him, and he held his lantern high. Within his tiny circle of yellow light, shadows danced like madmen, and George felt his heart quicken as he approached the cemetery. George found the right headstone, and he plunged his shovel into the hard earth. The work got harder with each shovelful of dirt, but George worked faster as the wind picked up, and he shivered thinking of the fire back inside. Sooner than George expected, the shovel thudded against wood. George cleared away the final layer of soil and opened the coffin. And there lay Annabelle, as fair and as beautiful as in the prime of her life. Clasped across her chest, her golden arm shimmered in the lantern light. Pushing aside flimsy thoughts of betrayal and robbery, George snatched the arm and slammed the coffin shut. The arm was cold as ice, and George set it beside him as he shoveled the dirt back on top of his wife. Then he scooped up his treasure, and he began the long walk back to the house. The wind grew stronger and stronger as he walked, gusting against his cloak and making the lantern sway in his hand. The wind whistled, and George thought he heard a voice carried high and faint across the fields. He froze, eyes wide, glancing to one side and the other. He saw no one, but with each step on the frosty ground, the wind's voice grew more distinct. Who's got my golden arm? George hurried his walk, but the words followed him louder and louder. Who's got my golden arm? The terrified man at last reached the mansion's door, which he flung open, slammed, and locked behind him. He ran to the parlor, where Ranger's ears perked up, and the friendly hound dog greeted its master. The fire was down to embers, but even that small heat felt wonderful as George dropped his shovel and sat down. And then he heard that ghastly voice again. Who's got my golden arm? George couldn't place the sound's source. It seemed to come from the chimney, the windows, the door, all at once. He clutched the heavy golden arm close to himself and ran to the window to shut the curtains, but still, the forlorn and angry cry continued. Who's got my golden arm? Ranger's bark barked and growled at the east wall, the one facing the cemetery. The wind made the boards of the house creak and moan, and the windows rattled, and that voice went on louder than ever. Who's got my golden arm? A gust of wind came straight down the chimney and put out the embers, and George ran to that golden arm, upstairs and down the hall to his bedroom, his heart thumping, his teeth chattering. Ranger's bark boomed, and then was overpowered by the slam of the front door being thrown off of its hinges, and the wind screamed through the house. Who's got my golden arm? George threw himself under the bed sheets, clutched that icy, cursed golden arm, and it felt heavy as iron, and he could feel the wind slam open the bedroom door. And then the wind stopped. And there was silence, followed by slow, shuffling steps and tiny thuds as pieces of frozen grave dirt fell to the floor. George held his breath and prayed silently as the ghastly footsteps stopped just next to his bed. Who's got my golden arm? You've got it! And that was the golden arm by Joe Wilson. Hopefully I got you guys a jump. Look fun. I don't know what's going on up there, but that was like perfectly timed right in the song. I love you too. I got another one. This one's going to be kind of a long one because I think we got a good time, right? Good time. Everybody's having a good Santa Pan? Is it good to be back? Good to be back for me too, man. Now, I haven't done a whole lot of these shows, but man, this is the best crowd I've had at any convention I've come back to. You guys are amazing. I love you. So you guys remember what we gone through already, right? We said there was gross out, there was horror, and the last one is terror, right? Yeah, nobody's using the word psychological horror anymore after tonight, right? Yes, right? Right. Good. I don't want to catch any of you saying it. If I see you in the comment section saying psychological horror, ooh. So that means we've already done our gross out story. Everybody loved the gross out one. The golden arm is actually a story that gives us horror. Whatever it is, we don't even know what it is, but whatever is coming after George there, that's our character of horror, even though there's not necessarily a gross out element to it. But I want to try to throw all of those together into this last story. I think this last story really gives us an element of horror, gives us an element of terror, and although it's not a tapeworm, it really gives us a nice element of gross out as well. Have any of you guys experienced sleep paralysis before? Yeah? Quite a few of you. Great, you'll love this one. It's called sleep paralysis. I could see that Vanessa Barnes was under great duress when she visited my, when she visited my office. The young woman had bags under her eyes and her hair was tousled and unkempt. She was having difficulty following our conversation. When was the last time you had a full night's sleep? I asked her. She glanced away and bit her bottom lip, carefully contemplating her answer as though it was the million-dollar question on some network game show. 2 days. It's been 2 days. I'm so tired, but I can't go back to sleep. See, I've been working as a sleep physician for 22 years, and in that time I've encountered hundreds of patients suffering from insomnia. Vanessa exhibited all the textbook symptoms: fatigue, anxiety, difficulty paying attention, but her file said that she was suffering from a different disorder: sleep paralysis. The condition's not as uncommon as you might think. Approximately 7.5% of the population experience episodes at some point in their life, and I myself have treated dozens of cases. Sleep paralysis typically occurs when the mind wakes before the body does. Think of the brain as having millions of light bulbs, all connected to on-off switches. Now normally when we wake up, the light bulbs all switch on simultaneously. But in some instances, sleep paralysis in particular, there are misfires. So only half the lights come on, rendering the other people suffering from this disorder in a strange state of half-sleep. See, this can lead to a whole host of peculiar symptoms. During one of these episodes, people experience horrible, realistic nightmares. where they feel like they're awake in their bed, but they can't move their body. Hallucinations are also common. Such are the sensations that something is in your room watching you, or on top of your chest. This is often accompanied by an ominous feeling of impending doom or danger. Episodes can last a few minutes at a time and usually end when the other light bulbs are finally switched on and the person is able to fully wake. While the condition can't cause physical harm to those that suffer from it, it can cause emotional distress. See, things were beginning to make sense. Vanessa Barnes wasn't having trouble falling asleep. She was simply not allowing herself to. She had kept herself awake for the past 48 hours after a particularly nasty bout of sleep paralysis, which explained why she was so exhausted when she was in my office during our consultation. I've been dealing with it my whole life, she told me, ever since I was a teenager, but it's happening more frequently now. It's worse, too. Everything just feels so real. It's always the same. I can't move, I can't breathe. There's someone in the room with me, but I can't turn my head to see who it is. They're whispering something directly into my ear, but I have no idea what they're saying. In our following sessions, I tried to explain to Vanessa how to cope with episodes of sleep paralysis, but her bouts were growing more persistent, and I could tell the young woman was still experiencing significant emotional distress. Of all the patients I've had who suffered from the condition, Vanessa's sleep disorder had taken the greatest toll on her psyche. I wanted to see her problem improve, so I got more aggressive with my treatment of her. I began to teach her lucid dreaming techniques, which I hope would allow her to gain some awareness whenever she entered the dream state. I began practicing the techniques myself when I was in college. I found that they helped increase cognizance and control over my unconscious mind. The treatment methods I employed with Vanessa included keeping a dream journal, meditation, and hypnotherapy sessions. By teaching Vanessa to become a lucid dreamer, my aim was that she would be able to recognize what was going on when she was experiencing a bout of sleep paralysis, and she'd be able to wake herself up. She came to my office twice a week for 2 months, but even though recollections of her dreams had been steadily improving, she still experienced episodes every 5 days or so. I began to dive deeper during our hypnotherapy sessions in order to see if any of her past experiences may have been responsible for triggering her nightmares. Go back to the first time you've ever experienced sleep paralysis, I told her during one of these sessions. How old are you? But she was already completely under by this time. Only during these sessions did she ever truly seem at peace. I'm 16. Oh, I had sent her consciousness back 10 years. Good. Is school giving you any anxiety? No. What about your parents? Are they having any issues with you or with each other? No. Have you witnessed anything that upset you recently? She paused briefly before, yes. Progress, I thought. Perhaps we're getting to the crux of the issue. What was it? Vanessa's voice began to tremble when I leaned forward a bit in my chair. The video from the email. Tell me about the video. Now, a bizarre story began to pour out of her, and the longer I listened, the more uncomfortable I became. The email's titled, "Don't Look at Me." I don't know who it's from. The name of the person who sent it is one I don't recognize. It's evening. I'm home alone and bored. I just can't help myself. It's like there's something compelling me to open it. The email contains a single link. Normally I'd be worried about a virus, but for some reason, that thought doesn't even cross my mind. It's like I feel a strange desire to click the link and see where it takes me. Adventure. Excitement. The video is dark, but I can tell I'm looking at a middle-aged man in his bedroom. It must be hot because there's 2 fans blowing and he's sleeping on top of his sheets in nothing but his boxer shorts. Books are on his nightstand, maybe they're diaries. I can't tell what they say. The video's too grainy. It's here that I notice that Vanessa's eyes begin to water. I postulate that whatever suppressed memory we're about to uncover has affected her very deeply. Vanessa, how does this make you feel? I'm afraid. I don't know why. I'm not looking at anything scary. There's a man sleeping, but I have this terrible feeling like a black hole's opened up in my chest and is eating me from the inside out. And what happens next? A voice begins to speak. A woman whispering. It's so soft at first that I turn my speakers all the way up so I can make out the words. Don't look at me, the voice is saying. Don't look at me, don't look at me, over and over again. Vanessa's breathing becomes erratic here, and I can tell that despite her being under hypnosis, she's beginning to panic. I thought about bringing her out of it, but this memory seemed too important. I felt like if we could get to the bottom of it, we could make considerable progress. I pressed on. Who's speaking, Vanessa? The woman. Well, what woman? Who is this woman? Please continue the story. The voice repeats the same words over and over again. For 2, maybe 3 minutes, steadily getting louder each time. The man doesn't wake up despite the fact that the voice is so loud at this point that I need to turn down my speakers. He doesn't even move. The woman, she enters the frame. I feel my skin go cold. Her arms, they're so long. Why are they so long? Her fingers touch the ground and I can't see her face. Her hair hangs over it like black cobwebs. Her skin is pale, snow white in contrast to the video. The woman is wearing a tattered nightgown, a pleated bodice pattern, the kind my grandmother used to wear. But it's covered in brown stains. What are the stains? I'm afraid to the man. Wake up! I think in my head. Wake up! Can't you hear her in the room with you? Tears had begun to stream down Vanessa's face. A part of me thought that the session had gone on long enough, but something deep down inside resisted the urge to pull her out of the hypnotic state. It was as if I was learning some powerful truth that had been hidden in the dark, the black depths of her subconscious, and just how Vanessa's curiosity had compelled her to open the email all those years ago. I had a strong desire to see the story unfold. When she comes to the camera side of the bed, I can see that her legs bend backwards like a bird. Her feet are forked, 2 large toes and sharp black nails at the end of them. Don't look at me, she keeps saying. Don't look at me, don't look at me. She's at the head of the bed now. She leans over the sleeping man with her long, lanky arms, pulls her hair from her face. I want to scream, but I can't. It's the most horrible thing I've ever seen. There's nothing human about the face, those eyes. It's as if they're staring right through the computer screen and into my soul, all of them. And repeats those words again. Don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me. Does my scream wake the man, or does he finally hear her? I don't know. His arms move first, and then he shifts to his side, facing the woman thing, and his eyes are wide. He's looking right at the thing. The creature jumps back, startled. It screams at him like it's angry that he woke up. It grabs him around the arm, and for the first time, I realize how big its hands are. He's crying, trying to twist away from it. He's a full-grown man, but he can't break the thing's grasp. It pulls him from the bed and drags him across the floor as if he's a small child. The man shouts and begs to be let free. Even after he's out of the frame, I can hear him, but it seems as though he's being carried off somewhere far away. And then there's nothing. Silence. I'm just looking at a quiet bedroom. All I can hear is the hiss of the fans. The video stops and I delete the email. My first experience with sleep paralysis happens that night, but I can't remember what I dreamt when I wake up in the morning. I ended our hypnotherapy session here, and I pulled Vanessa back into a fully conscious state. And she was visibly shaken. When I asked her if she can recall anything from our session, she said that she cannot. But I could not feel there was something in her eye that told me she wasn't being 100% truthful. I saw her out of my office and reminded her of her next appointment the following Monday before instructing her to continue practicing her lucid dreaming technique over the weekend. Vanessa would no-show her next 2 scheduled appointments. And when my secretary attempted to contact her, the calls would go straight to voicemail. Even when I personally tried reaching out, I would not get a response, and the weeks wore on, and my concern for Vanessa began to fade. See, I had other patients who required my professional expertise and the attention that I couldn't waste dwelling on patients that didn't want to show up to their sessions. Still, though, the thoughts of her strange story during our hypnotherapy session sometimes lingered in my mind. Thoughts of that day were reignited like a bonfire 2 weeks ago. when I received an email from her. I was at home in my study that evening, going through work emails on my laptop when I saw it. See, at first I thought Vanessa was finally responding to my inquiry about her missed sessions. But when I read the email's title, I felt the air rush from my lungs. Don't look at me. It was just like in her story. The body of the email contained only a single link. Was she playing a prank on me? Is this her way of getting back at me for drudging up some twisted nightmare that had haunted her ever since her teenage years? Or was her story, in fact, genuine? Part of me feared that it was, and I knew I simply would not get the closure I needed until I found out for myself. Adventure. Excitement. I reached over and I turned my desk lamp on, and then I clicked the link. The link opened up a video of a bedroom. It was evening. Unlike the story that Vanessa described, the camera was in night vision and the image was clear. But I gritted my teeth and prepared myself for whatever green hell I was about to witness. There was a woman in the bed. I looked closer, and for the second time that night I saw something that stole my breath. It was Vanessa. She was sleeping. And on her bedside table was her dream journal. I recognized the ribbon hanging out of it that she used as a bookmark. I watched her for what felt like an eternity, and I recognized that she was in a state of deep sleep. Her creeping dread slithered its way through my mind. See, I thought the video had no sound at first until I realized I hadn't plugged my headphones in. And against my better judgment, I picked up the jack and I plugged it into the port. The voice had already begun. A horrible, garbled whisper that made my skin crawl was coming from somewhere out of the camera's line of sight. "Don't look at me," it was saying. Again and again, it repeated those terrible words. "Don't look at me. Don't look at me." I realized then what was going on, and I thought, I prayed this was still some elaborate prank in the pit of my stomach. I knew this was not the case. Vanessa was experiencing sleep paralysis. What if the man that she had told me about in her story had been suffering from it as well? What if it had been the only thing keeping him safe? Please don't wake up, Vanessa, I thought to myself. For the love of God, forget everything that I taught you. If my lucid dreaming technique ended up working, she would regain her senses, wake up, and then what would happen? The woman thing entered the frame, and it was far more heinous than anything I could have ever pictured when I heard Vanessa's tale. Its limbs were of hideous proportions, knuckles dragging the ground like a grotesque primate, with legs longer and lankier than I had originally expected. Just as my patient had explained, the knees bent backward at an unnatural angle, the skin of which looked hard and calloused like the scales of a desert reptile. I couldn't see the face. Stringy black hair draped over it, and I prayed to God that whatever was behind it would stay hidden. "Don't look at me," it continued to repeat. The woman slinked slowly around the bed, and as it did so, her long bony fingers began to tug playfully at the covers. "Don't look at me. Don't look at me." My heart was beating like a drum inside my chest. The grandfather clock in my study struck 12, and the initial chime nearly made me jump out of my seat. The woman's voice grew louder, more tenacious, more aggressive, and I thought that I might go mad from the sound of it. "Don't look at me! Don't look at me! Don't look at me!" The woman screamed, reached the head of the bed, then leaned down, parting her hair, and my mouth went dry from fright. Just as Vanessa had said, it wasn't a woman at all. Perhaps in some ways, its body bore a warped and twisted resemblance to that of a woman, but the word woman would imply that what I was looking at was human, and this thing's face was anything but that. It was covered in eyes. Hundreds of them, no, thousands of them, eyes within eyes, all different shapes and sizes, and I felt, as insane as this might sound, that they were watching me just as closely as they were watching Vanessa. They glowed like awful green emeralds on my computer screen. And I wondered what horrible color they were in person. "Don't look at me! Don't look at me! Don't look at me!" I would have leapt up and run screaming from my home in that instant if I had not noticed Vanessa beginning to stir in her bed. God, no, I thought, she's coming out of her sleep paralysis. The thing stood still as a statue, face just inches from Vanessa. It happened so fast, my poor girl snapped her head around, saw the creature, then jumped back with a shriek. The creature jumped back as well, as if in shock, let out an ear-piercing shriek of its own, then lunged in arms toward Vanessa and threw the covers off of her. It gripped her around her ankle with one massive paw that dragged her, kicking and screaming from the bed. Vanessa tried to free herself, but just like that man in her story, the thing's grip was too strong. It pulled her violently across the floor and out of the frame of the camera. And the video probably went on for 30 seconds after that, but it felt like I sat there for hours, listening to Vanessa's screams fade as she was dragged down an impossibly long hallway before the video cut to black. I closed my laptop after that. I went straight to my mini bar and I took a pull of whiskey. I mean, it burned like fire. I nearly coughed it up, but I didn't care. I sat on my couch cradling the bottle in my lap until the sun came up. It took an entire day to come down from the shock of what I'd seen, but it wouldn't be long before the horror would return. I woke the following night unable to move my arms and legs. There was a terrible electricity in the air. It smelled of dread, of doom, of death. The sleep paralysis wouldn't last long. My experience with lucid dreaming helped me break whatever spell had been cast on me. But even though I could move my arms and legs, that awful sense of dread had not withered away. Instinctually, I remained as still as possible, and thank the Lord that I did. The voice started quietly at first, but it was even more horrendous in person than it had been on my computer. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. And that was Sleep Paralysis by Vincent Van Gogh. Thank you guys so much. Nice. Okay. You did that perfectly. Thank you guys so much for coming out to MrCreepyPasta Storytime. Hopefully you got something that you enjoyed. Did everybody have fun? Yeah. I really appreciate you guys for making this like such a welcoming con to come back to. And I hope all of you have a wonderful time as Japan. Thank you guys.